I live in the city of Denton, Texas, and around town there's a pretty well-known urban legend surrounding the cryptid known as the Goat Man. Similarly well known is the area he's primarily seen at, known as Goatman's Bridge off of Old Alton Road. Denton is a pretty old city, and the myth behind Goatman's Bridge might as well be just as old. There are a few stories that get spread around about the origins of the Goat Man, however, most are historically unfounded. However, the most agreed upon story is the one about a poor African American goat herder named Oscar Washburn, who ran a small farmstead around the area in the post-Civil War era, who was supposedly caught by a lynch mob who saw Oscar's farm side and proceeded to hang Oscar off of what is now the Goatman's Bridge. The story goes that the man fell from where he was hanged and was washed away by the river below, and the body was never recovered. There do seem to be some historical records of a goat herder who could have matched the description, but of course the story itself was enough to start the legend. Since then, people have reported sightings of a strange goat-like humanoid that wanders the surrounding forests by the bridge, as well as sightings on the bridge itself. It doesn't help that there are a bunch of weirdos around town who do all sorts of strange things back in those woods, but most of the college kids around town just like going to walk the trails or scare each other around the bridge. I've even admittedly been around the area myself on more than a few occasions without ever really experiencing anything too odd or out of the ordinary, but a new friend of mine who I had met very recently before this had never been herself. So a buddy of mine and I decided to take her over since she was very interested in the idea of the Goatman. There is, supposedly, a way to see the Goatman that is apparently effective, and so we decided to go through with the process just to increase our chances of something weird happening for our new friend's first time. The idea was that you drive your vehicle onto the center of the bridge, turn off your lights, and either honk your horn 3 times or reach out your window and knock on one of the steel beams 3 times. Seemed simple enough, and a lot like a made-up game, so we really didn't take the idea too seriously, even though our new friend was even more enticed by the idea of the supposed ritual. So we planned a night after classes that we were all free, loaded up into my car, and we made our way over to the bridge. Old Alton is already a pretty creepy part of town enough by itself, and the adjacent forest next to the bridge is used for an annual outside haunted house, so the area has a pretty heavy air of creepy surrounding it. We made it to the bridge, opened the gate that blocked the road, and we proceeded to drive straight onto the middle of the bridge. Just to cover all bases, we decided to do both the 3 honks and the 3 knocks, just to be sure, you know. We parked, I switched off the headlights, and we proceeded to honk the horn, then reach out and knock on the beams. Since we were on this bridge with our lights off, it was pretty damn dark, hard to make out really anything from inside the car. Our new friend had an almost adrenaline junkie-like bounce to her as she anticipated something happening. But nothing did for a few minutes. Until we heard some rustling of bushes that sounded like it was coming from behind us. But then, also maybe in front of us, there was silence, followed by a low moaning, and what sounded like walking on the bridge beams ahead of us. My friend immediately lost her thrill high and pretty apparently became scared and asked if we could leave. I tried to flip the headlights back on, but they wouldn't turn, and after a few minutes of trying and the footsteps getting closer, I just said screw it and just backed up in the dark. As I was looking behind me in reverse, the car left the edge of the bridge, and at the same time our lights flicked back on, followed by screams from my friends. I looked back forward and didn't see anything through the headlights, although both of my friends were now pale white. We floored it back to our place, and after we got home, my friends told me how when the lights finally flicked back on, they saw a strange, upright, humanoid-looking animal with dead black eyes that darted off back into the forest as quickly as they saw it. They both saw the same thing, so I guess there's some corroboration there. I don't know if I'm happy or sad that I wasn't looking back when the lights flicked back on. Clearly, my friends were a bit off for a good while after that night, never really wanting to talk about it. I still have technically yet to see anything during all of my time around Goatman's Bridge, but from stories I've heard, and that night I had with my friends, maybe I am glad I may never see anything myself. The swamps and backwater bayous of Louisiana have long been the settings for local stories and urban legends. It's easy to get lost in the dense bogs if you're not careful or if you're not familiar with the area. One of these local stories in my state has to do with the legend of the Rougarou, also known by the locals as the Loup-garou, a white and black, upright, werewolf-type creature that is said to roam the swamps at night. It's even become popular enough of a legend around Acadiana and surrounding towns that there's even an annual festival that gets thrown in honor of the Rougarou. Louisiana is known for its Cajun heritage and Catholic roots, and part of the Rougarou's origins has ties with that Catholicism. Families will tell their kids about how the Rougarou will come for them if they do not properly observe Lent, as well as how the Rougarou will eat those who are disobedient and wander off alone into the swamplands. Like many similar urban legends, it's become so popular in the area that it's almost lost its scary mysticism. Party piñatas and balloons of the creature will do that. But that doesn't mean there aren't still those in the area who believe in and respect the existence of the Rougarou, and with that comes plenty of sightings that have been documented throughout the years. One such sighting even came from a buddy of mine. I trust him enough, and there was truth and fear enough in his eyes to make me believe him. He told me how there was a time where he and his son were out on their boat, looking for catfish holes and checking their gator lines. They had made their way into the denser portion of the swamp when they came across a nice spot to dock their boat. From this spot, they could move on foot and wade their way through the knee-high water until they found a good spot to look for catfish. They eventually came to a small river inlet that had a dry land portion on one side and seemed perfect for catfish dens. My friend and his son both started to reach down into the water on their hunt, feeling their way through the muddy sides of the riverbanks. The sun was slowly setting, and they knew they had to get back to the boat before dark, when his son found his hand slipping down into a catfish den. He grabbed onto the catfish and pulled it out, happy as could be, when he noticed his dad looking off onto the dry land like a statue. My friend said he moved as slowly as he could back to his son. "Dad, is everything okay?" Put the fish down. No sudden movements. His son listened, and as he looked off more closely in the direction his father was looking, he caught the eyes of what his father saw. They both described it as a tall, gaunt, wolf-like creature that was up on its back legs, staring at them with sunken eyes and an opened mouth from behind some trees. They both slowly backed up from where they were, making sure to not break line of sight, and trying to not make any quick movements that could make them seem more like prey. After backing up for a few seconds, they said they saw the creature dip back behind the trees and it disappeared into the marshes. They used this opportunity to move as fast as they could, or as fast as possible when you're in a knee-high swamp, until they finally reached their boat, released the tether, and made their way to the center of the river where they felt more safe. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, and they both described the boat ride back as one of the most uncomfortable moments of their lives. They said how they felt like they were being watched and followed from the bank line all the way back to town, even saying that they thought they saw the occasional glint of eyes peering back at them from time to time. My friend admitted that he really wasn't sure what it was they saw that day. At first, he was just concerned about it being a wild animal that might harm him or his son. But looking back at the event with a clearer head, he did say that what they saw did coincidentally enough match the description of the Rougarou. The annual festivals weren't quite the same for them after that, but my friend said he's yet to have another encounter like it. I feel sorry for how it seemed to mess his son up a bit. But in all honesty, I'm glad this story is theirs, and that I didn't have this experience myself. I'll stick to the piñatas and the party balloons. This is the story of an encounter I had involving the New Mexico cryptid, spirit, or whatever, known as La Malahora, an entity seen at crossroads on the long, empty desert roads that span the state. I still can't drive deserted roads at night without thinking about what happened during this story. My friend Isabella called me sobbing one day to tell me that her husband and her were getting a divorce. Devastated for her, I called my husband, who was on a business trip in Chicago, to inform him that I was going to drive to Santa Fe so I could comfort her. It was late in the day when I started the drive. Santa Fe is a 4-hour drive from where I live, so I estimated I would reach Isabella's around midnight or so. I found myself trying to do everything I could to keep from falling asleep. Loud music, window down, and such. As I approached the turnoff to Isabella's, I rolled up my window to stop the flow of cold air and tried to focus since the road had no streetlights. I started slowing down to make sure I wouldn't miss the turn while driving in the dark with just my headlights. As the road split into two, I turned left as I needed to, when suddenly a woman appeared in front of my car, and I had to slam my brakes pretty hard to avoid hitting her. Seconds later, though, the woman was gone. I quickly looked around my car to see if maybe I had just imagined her from how tired I was, or if she had moved around me. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, I saw her right beside my window looking in at me. Her eyes glowed an unnatural red. She had short, crooked, broken teeth. I screamed as she suddenly leaped for the window, hitting the glass with her bony hands. I jammed my foot down as hard as I could on the gas. It took a few seconds for my tires to catch traction on the rocks before I was able to finally speed off. But to my horror, I noticed that this woman thing was starting to keep pace with my car, even with my acceleration. I finally pulled off and away from her, but as I looked back in my rearview mirror, I noticed she was taller than before and was pointing at my car, mouthing something I didn't understand. I pulled my attention back to the road, making sure I didn't swerve off. I was in utter panic when I finally reached Isabella's. I ran up and pounded on her door until she let me in. She saw I was distraught and got me something to drink and had me sit down. I proceeded to tell her what I saw. She looked back at me in concern and asked, "Was it at the fork?" I nodded yes. Her face twisted more as she said, "It must have been La Malahora. Isabella told me that this was bad, and that La Malahora only appears when someone is about to die. I don't necessarily believe this superstition, but what I saw still freaked me out. Isabella was so distracted that she didn't even mention the divorce while helping me with my bags. I felt better the next morning, but as the day progressed, I couldn't shake a feeling of dread. Neither of us mentioned what had happened the night before, but we were both worried as I said my goodbyes and started to head home. Isabella insisted on accompanying me back. We left quickly. Neither of us wanted to pass that fork at night. Within 20 minutes of pulling into my driveway, after the long drive back, a police car pulled up at my house. Isabella and I just stared at each other, too afraid to say anything. The police officer informed me gently, or as best he could, that while returning from a dinner in Chicago, my husband had been mugged. The assumed time of the mugging I was given lined up with when I would have had my encounter with that woman on the road. His body was found dead in an alley. My husband had been killed during the mugging. All I can really say is that be careful when you drive alone at night down fork roads in New Mexico, myths or not. And if you do happen to see the same lady I did, that twisted La Malahora, immediately check up on your friends and family to make sure they're okay. Life is too short and precious.